Chairman Waggy,
Here.
Alderman Gould,
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
All members present.
Great. We'll move on to agenda approval. Any changes or amendments? If not, approved by acclamation. Great. We'll move on to item 4A, citizen comment. And for the ARB members, I'll recognize you when we have that topic come up, just to focus it a little bit. Anybody else in the audience wish to address the board? Okay, great. Move on to item 5, reports of committee chairs. I have nothing to report that I didn't talk about 3 days ago in the Board of Aldermen meeting.
No report.
Great. Steve?
No report.
Nancy?
No report.
All right, move on to item 7, moving the Public Works Department. I like the momentum so far. This is great.
All right. Got a bunch of little odds and ends to go over. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions on any of these. But at the top of the list, you'll see the accessibility ramp that was discussed at the special meeting, and that would be that area at Eulalie and Rosalie. The request was to put in some sort of ramp on the Leewin Trail side. We'll have to take measurements on it. I put together a little memo there, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. The only thing I want to check is the slopes to make sure we don't solve one problem and make another problem, because I know that you're getting the water that's coming down Rosalie heading back towards that area. So, you know, worst case, we would just create maybe a little bit of a berm or change the angle there slightly, but I don't think it'll be a problem. But the only way to see how it works is to try it out. But I think that would work if we put something in there. I don't see why we couldn't do that this spring. You know, right now, what I would plan on doing is cutting that asphalt out and putting it in concrete as well. You know, make something more durable. I wouldn't try to put asphalt back there. So I don't know if you have any questions on that one.
So you think you do that this spring? Do you have a?
I think so, because I mean, there's nothing impeding it that I see. It's not like there's a fire hydrant or anything else that's nearby. You know, we'll still call in locates and everything like we always do. I just don't see anything that would prevent us from doing it.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, Nancy.
Are there any drainage issues from, I don't know how the water flows there, but
Yeah, and that's what I need to measure with we've got a slope measurement tool. You know, it's basically a digital level. So I'll just go around there and take some measurements, you know, because it also needs to meet ADA too. If we build that ramp, it can't be more than 8.3%. So I want to keep it as flat as possible. But I don't want water to pool there either, so.
thank you.
Yep. And then over on Rosalie Avenue, the STP project, the lights still aren't lit yet, and we're waiting for Ameren to schedule its crew. They did confirm they have the check from us. You know, we have to pay in advance, so they do have that. I know we had sent our emails over to them telling them we inspected it, and they thought the county was going to inspect it as well, and the county doesn't inspect it, it's just us. So that should take care of that once they put the meter in and do the wire terminations. And then the next item down was request for removal. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, handicap parking spot at 8910 Madge. So if you recall, the history is written down here. So that was put in 2021, and there were several different things that needed to occur after that new home was built next to it for this sign to eventually go away. The sign was needed during the new construction of 8906, I believe it was. Yeah. So we're planning on removing that as soon as we hear back. I know planning was, I guess, discussing the occupancy inspection. You know, I don't believe that there was one done whenever that renter moved in. So there were these different items that needed to be done before we pull the sign. And I'll have to check with the city attorney, because I'm thinking since the board authorized us to put the sign up, that we would have to have the board authorize us to remove it.
Jeff?
Yeah, I guess the question that I have is really related to the fact that, yes, I uncovered the fact that there might be some violations at 8910 Madge as far as code issues, whether it's inspections or not proper off-street parking. But that's independent of why the sign was requested in the first place, and I don't see why we would want to conflate those two. The sign was there for the during the construction, because construction vehicles were parking in front of this man's house. Now that that condition is over, I don't understand why we can't just remove the sign. And I thought the ordinance was written in a way that it said that once the condition of the construction is done, it would be removed. I believe, I mean, I know that's when we talked about the ordinance to do that.
Yes, Steve?
I agree with Jeff. I don't remember there being any other contingencies in there except for the occupancy of the new home that was built. Now, if there's some other issues, you know, I guess we require a off-street parking at every resident. Then that's something we need to take up as far as condemnation or whatever. But I think that's a separate issue from removing the sign.
Yeah, and I can check with Kevin, because I'm sure we will need, you know, since we actually had authorization to put it up, it would basically rescind the original
Right.
order.
Since there's been a vote already from the committee to remove it, right? So it can now go to the Board of Aldermen.
Right.
And then we'll work behind the scenes to resolve the other issues with planning development.
So is that what, it would be an ordinance to repeal the
Right.
existing ordinance, right?
Right.
And do
Do we need,
somebody
do you
makes that
need a
motion?
motion?
I thought there was a motion already. Has there
There was
not
not.
been? There-
I'll
well, then-
make that motion,
Okay.
the motion to repeal the ordinance that established the sign.
I'll second.
And then that would go just directly to Board of
Board.
Aldermen, it doesn't need to
Right.
come back through here, correct?
Right.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
And then the next item, the sanitation truck grant. I don't know if you looked at the letter that we included in there, but we had applied for this back in, I believe it was September. Yeah, September of last year. And actually, submittals were due October 22nd. So we submitted for this grant with the Solid Waste District. I had originally applied for a little bit more than that. I had asked for $45,000. And then in late December, we received word in this letter that we weren't getting the 45, but rather 35,000. So this would be put towards the purchase of a sanitation recycle truck. You know, actually, the truck can be used more than just recycling, but that was how I wrote the grant, was that it would be to bolster our fleet and use it for recycling and things like that. So sanitation too, if you remember, we purchased that truck in 2021. It was roughly $212,000. This particular money, if it has to go to Ways and Means, because this would have been for truck number one. Truck number one was in the budget, then it was removed. So in your 2022 budget book, if you look at where truck number one is in the line items, it's 4601, 6541, and it's zero for years 22, 23, and 24. So there's no funding in our budget for it. If we were to approve this with Ways and Means, then of course we would have to figure out where does the money come from in those following years. You know, the other thing is that the Solid Waste District won't have the money available until sometime after April. So, and then of course there's a bidding process. We have to follow their procedures if we're going to move forward with this. So realistically, you wouldn't actually have but a few months of 2022 if you were to move forward with it. Then you're going to have to figure out what to do in years 2023, 24, possibly 25. So we have time to look at this. This was just for informational purposes. There's no motion, there's no action needed, but I don't know if you have any questions on it. All right, and then the last thing, this Ameren Biz Savers rebate program. Alderman Wegge was the one that brought it to our attention for LED light improvements. And Ameren actually had that program. It was good for anything you did in 2019, 2020, all the way through the end of 21. And all I had to do was prove it through invoices and that we paid Home Depot and bought these different items. So it's like the replacement of these T8 fixtures in here. These used to be just a regular fluorescent. Those are now LEDs. We also did them in the hall. We did them over at the fire department. Their hallway had some older ones, even though the building's, 2012, it was older technology. So long story short, we received 2 rebate checks, and those amounts are in the report. $206 for the fire department, and not quite $548 for this building. So a little over $750. It took a few hours to put the forms together and work with Ameren to get this approved. And then the good thing is, our CO2 emissions, they'll be lowered by a little over 50 metric tons with the 2 buildings, the improvements that were done in each. And then your kilowatt hours, that's like a 70,000 kilowatt hour savings over a 5-year timeline. So, good for the environment, and we get a little bit of money. And there is a program with Biz Savers for this year for air conditioners. So I'm going to try to apply the same logic for the police station. We did the air conditioner over there last year and see if I can get any of that, because that was tens of thousands of dollars for an air conditioner rooftop unit. So I believe that's it, if you have any other questions.
Well, thanks, Dan, for doing that. I take no credit on that. That came out of Suscom, briefing on that Biz Savers, and, you know, I think we thought it might be a little bit more, but $750 is $750. So.
Yeah, I had it at 1,000, but they didn't like my rationale for some of it, so they ratcheted it down, so.
And I think more importantly, now we understand the program, so we can hit it for future things. So
Right.
thank you for doing that.
Yep,
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Dan.
okay, thanks.
Okay, Eric, come on up.
Thanks. I just expected you guys would get up there.
Ready?
So I have a couple quick things. The first is the fence at Walgreens. If you guys have noticed, Empire Fencing has completed the portion of the fence that belongs to Sandstone. So it leaves a smaller section, probably about a third of the fence left for the city. And so it's our intention to replace that as soon as we can. We were thinking about doing it last week until the snow came, and obviously we want to talk to the Public Works Committee first too, so the snow kind of helped a little bit. So our plan is just to continue what they did, which is the shadow box wood fence. We actually do have someone in-house who we just hired who could probably do that, especially a much smaller section. We'll probably do like one house per day and be able to knock that out in a couple weeks.
And that's going to be the exact same height and everything, and the spacing of the shadow box and material?
Yes.
It'll match exactly? Okay, cool.
And then secondly, just want to kind of give an update on the tree replacement on White Avenue. And so we got the funding for the 13 trees that came in. And so our plan was to replace the 9 trees on White, plus the kind of the trees that we listed below. Mainly, these are trees that people have contacted the urban forester and said, hey, I'd really like a tree in the right-of-way. There's not one there. So we like those people, so we tend to try to help them out. And so what we could do is we could do all this, but the one issue is that what we found out is MSD won't be done with their portion of that project until August, according to Dan and Whitney, when they helped me out, figure that one out. So that obviously misses this planning cycle. So what we could do is just use the money we have and replace all 13 trees in different vacant sites throughout the city, and then replace the white trees next November, which would be my recommendation, so we can get these trees in the ground faster.
You need a motion or direction, or I
As long as you guys say it's okay, I think we're okay.
think we're all right?
Great idea.
Great, thank you.
All right, planning and development. Whitney, anything today?
Items will be addressed further below, but the planning and, I'll just provide, the Planning and Zoning Commission met last night, and they moved forward to text amendment for the auto-oriented and other uses that are inconsistent with the plan. So they'll come before the Board of Aldermen on February 22nd. And then the text amendment for the potential cornerstone development to allow greater density for multifamily will move forward to the Board of Aldermen with a positive recommendation on the March 7th meeting. There's always, with the text amendment, there's always a delay because it requires notification in a local newspaper, which is only printed once a month. So it's a little longer delay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Whitney. And then Suscom, Eric, there's some items in here.
Yeah, Whitney's gonna take that one.
Okay.
Let's see. All right, so in prior discussions, y'all were asking about gross receipts and what are the fees for restaurants, and if they were to enter into the Green Dining Alliance, could we work out a way to reduce their fees? Currently, their fees are based upon the gross receipts, so it's $1.25 for every 1,000 of sales reported. They there's wide variety based upon each business, but generally they are mostly over $250. MyGov currently doesn't have a way for us to just do an automatic reduction. So we could work on how to figure that out, but we would also want to require some sort of documentation that they have joined and do as part of their, and provide that as part of their annual business license. So it is something we can look into further and how to do that reduction, but that's what their fees are based upon.
So, I mean, my personal opinion is this is something I think would be great to do for two reasons. One is that being a member of Green Dining Alliance, you get a lot of free marketing, and so that brings more customers into Brentwood, and we get that sales tax, but also their big thing is styrofoam and elimination and trash reduction. So, you know, how often are we talking about trash and trash out in the streets? And so this would be, I think, a benefit to the town if we did this. So Whitney, I don't know if you need an action from us, or is it to just explore more with Larry of what would need to happen in MyGov, as well as what that process would be for getting that verification, if the board does agree that this is something we wanted to continue to explore.
Yes, as you're right. I think we just need your direction if you want us to explore this more. We need to, how do we do this for next year's business license? We would also need to look at if it does require a text amendment to specifically say this is part of their, you know, those businesses, Green Dining Alliance provide a reduction, and what kind of they shall provide documentation over that. That's something we can look into for next year's business.
Yes, Steve?
So how would this work annually when a restaurant's business license comes up? What are the logistics you'd have to go through to verify that with the alliance that they are a member, the restaurant, and then they get the discount?
Well, that's essentially what we would have to ask for, or they have to provide, as part of their business, every year they have to renew a business license. They're only valid from January 1 to December 31st, and you have to renew by February 15th. So there's a way that, you know, let us know if you're part of the Green Dining Alliance and upload they get some sort of certificate that they are a member and so that's how we would figure out what that documentation would need to be, and then we could, once they provided that, we can see about how to reduce their fee by $250 or whatever the fee. Yeah, that's something we would have to work out. Yeah.
You know any other municipalities that are funding
Nope.
this?
The closest is Maplewood has a green dining district.
Yeah.
And so they just do communal composting and things like that. I mean, Green Dining Alliance has a website, so you can see the list of all the restaurants. So I don't think the logistics of verifying, and I also think Green Dining Alliance would be, I'm talking for them, but I think they would be quite happy if we did something like this, because they would.
Oh, I'm sure
surely
they would be. I just don't know about using taxpayer funds to promote a private organization. I'm not too comfortable with that, to be honest with you. I don't know where we do that.
A private nonprofit.
Yeah, I don't see where we use public funds to advance their agenda or whatever. I don't know whether we've ever done that in the past.
Like Backstoppers.
Did we ever send money to Backstoppers? Have we ever used public funds for Backstoppers?
Like the Brentwood Ice Festival coming up with Backstoppers, right? Isn't that?
I don't remember. I do know that municipalities can use their funds to do marketing for the city. So I guess another way to look at this would be, this is marketing for a certain group of businesses within the community. So you can use your funds for marketing. Placing ads in tourist magazines or, local magazines to promote. I would like to think that maybe ultimately the city, in partnership with the developer, when the MC district is fully developed, it might give us a chance to start to realize that let's start to promote the community. So you can use the money for that. You can use the economic development sales tax for that. Those
No,
are my
I
comments.
could definitely see on our city website, I mean, we promote all the businesses in Brentwood on our city website. I could see having, as Maplewood does, they promote their Green Dining Alliance district on their city website. I could see doing that. I just have a hard time redirecting public funds for private use.
Yeah, Nancy?
Well, I have two questions. First of all, like the solar, Grow Solar, is there any fee to be part of Grow Solar, or are we just listed and,
We're just listed.
we're just listed? Okay. And then the other, like, I just pulled up the Green Dining Alliance, and there are lots of restaurants in other Kirkwood, Clayton, the city, Webster, goes on and on. Do any of them have this kind of, I guess, how did the idea of the reduction in the taxes come up?
So it was a conversation at Suscom, and Eric, feel free to jump in, but if you look at a map of all the green dining alliances, there are none in Brentwood. So they are all around us, and so we're kind of a desert. And so the thought was, why aren't there? And is there a way to incentivize that, for the benefits of it? Yeah, Jeff?
Is Green Dining Alliance the only organization that does, green restaurant kind of stuff? So I think I like the idea of Suscom maybe communicating and advertising to all of our restaurants and saying, hey, consider reducing your footprint and the waste and all that. Here are resources that you could join that could also help draw people to the city. I'm in agreement with Steve in the sense that it makes me a little uncomfortable to just right out of the gate say, hey, we're going to subsidize your joining of this. and it's going to be a recurring subsidization to the alliance for this. It seems like an use of taxpayer money in a way that I like the idea of it. I like all the things they stand for, but how we go about it, I think we need to figure that out. And I don't know that there's enough. We don't even know how we would reduce it if we could. It seems to me, just saying, hey, we'll pay for your membership seems a little loose. So
I just worry about so what's next? We discount grocery stores if they stop using plastic bags? I mean, this is the door we start opening. Chicken places that use free-range chickens. I mean, where do we start drawing the line if we open up this door?
I would say, I feel like this door is open, right? We support a lot of nonprofits in this town. I mean, the Backstoppers is an example as.
Not with public funds, we don't. I just don't believe we do.
We've had events. I think food has been provided, and the payment for the food is given to Backstoppers. I don't know necessarily that when we've brought food to these events, have the city paid for, the modified Brentwood Days? Did the city pay for the food?
I think there's almost three different things. We talk about Backstoppers
Okay.
independently. A few years ago, the fire department and the police department used to hold a barbecue, and they'd hold it at City Hall. I couldn't tell you a whole lot about that because I wasn't involved in that one.
Those were donated by different businesses in town, so I was here for that. City didn't contribute anything to it.
So, and again, I'm not sure if staff donated their times for being there and things like that. So I'll tell you then, when we kind of included Backstoppers in a couple of our events, especially the barbecuing, we just asked them to be there, and they became our sole vendor. So basically it became helping out Backstoppers, a lot of those events. The Brentwood Ice Festival is a tad bit different because it is an event that we host for the city, and the proceeds, we present a check every time we do it to Backstoppers. So, we have staff time dedicated to that. So, we are paying staff to help out with that event, and we have staff the night of the event. So, charge the lifeguard, or not lifeguard, sorry, the skate cars, we don't charge the building managers, those type of things for that event. So we're donating our staff time.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. I'm just using that as an example of things that the city is currently doing to encourage that.
I just think if a restaurant wants to stand out, then they go with this Green Dining Alliance, and they advertise it as part of their business model that, hey, look what we're part of. Come eat here if this is something you're interested in. I just don't see why financially we should promote that with public monies.
A little bit more of a background. Alderman Wegge gave a great kind of introduction on Green Dining Alliance, but this actually was something that was kind of near and dear to, well, is near and dear to Alderwoman O'Neill's heart. She's the one who brought it to SUSCOM for discussion. And the idea at SUSCOM was that, yes, this is something that would be great for dining or for restaurants to do. And they kind of took the view of the city, again, being a forefront, a leader in sustainability. This is something that the city could help out with to kind of be that leader in sustainability. So that's their view as it came forward to this committee.
We can ask the city attorney for an opinion as they do more research so that you can get comfortable with what you might be interested in doing.
Yeah, Jeff?
Have we engaged Green Dining Alliance on this idea at all, or is this just a idea that was like, hey, what if we paid for the, I mean, have we talked to Green
Yeah.
Dining Alliance?
Well,
Yeah, Green Dining Alliance came to the
Sorry, I'm looking at you.
yeah, the SUSCOM committee.
I can answer too.
And
was
I
at
think
that
the
meeting.
idea they had is that, they're passionate about their thing, and they're passionate about their organization. They're very proud of the work that's been done, but it's hard, it continues to be hard to get people. The fee that they charge is, primarily administration. They do audits every year of each of these restaurants, and so part of the fee is to help pay for their time more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the fees don't seem exorbitant. I just wonder, like, where the idea that, hey, what if Brentwood paid for came from? Like, if it was from them, or if it was just a
No, that came from-
brainstorm idea that the SUSCOM,
Yep, exactly.
okay.
And I just lost it. Oh, there's one other example about supporting nonprofits that I just thought I'd bring up, and it's one that happened in Clayton and also here, which was the Century Foundation. So in the past, the cities of Clayton, I think we provided funding for the Century Foundation as part of their mission. So I just thought I'd throw that out there too.
Well, yeah, we did, but that was because we did not we gave it to them to do the promotion of that 100-year.
Yeah, for Brentwood, but Clayton did give them just blanket to start up. It's basically startup.
I'm
cash
talking
more
about
than
here in
anything else.
Brentwood. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know about
But
Clayton.
again, it's just another example I was thinking of, trying to help out the conversation. Or muddy it up, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Nancy?
Well, I would be, if Kevin can give us some thoughts on, the merits of this and if this is, I mean, I sort of think this is great, but then is this some sort of a slippery slope that when someone else comes to ask, well, you did it for the Green Dining Alliance, so you have to do it for this other thing. So I just want to make sure that we're knowledgeable about what we might be stepping into, so.
Is the committee okay with them, number one, talking to Kevin, seeing what the MyGov changes what that would entail, and getting more detail on this, or do we want to just stop it now?
Well-
Yeah, Nancy?
I mean, I don't know that Whitney needs to be doing anything at this moment, since it's February and it's an entire year until this is going to come up. So if we could get some feedback from Kevin and then make a decision before we ask Whitney and her staff to do work on it, I think that might be hate for them to do work, and then next month we're like, oh, we don't want to do it, so.
So what are we asking Kevin? What is Kevin going to research? Exactly. Can public funds be used for private charities, or
Well, is this a 501c3? What is this?
Yep.
I just want to make sure we come back
Yeah,
with
and
the
I mean,
answer
I guess, and
we're
it's a
seeking.
convoluted thing, because it's not like the city's paying the nonprofit, the city is reducing the fee to the restaurant because they're doing, so It's not like we're writing a check to the Green Dining Alliance for each restaurant who joins. We're reducing their fees. So we're not technically giving money, but I would be curious how Kevin looks at this and analyzes it.
Captured everything you've said.
So everybody okay with that approach?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Whitney. All right, move on to item 8, the consent agenda. The only thing we have on there is meeting minutes. So anybody want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any comments, questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. Move on to item 9, old business. Okay, here's the Architecture Review Board item. Whitney, why don't you go ahead, and then I'll recognize Carl and Matt if they would like to speak and give their input as members of ARB.
All right. This was brought up based upon a long-term discussion and concerns with the lack of quorum on both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Architectural Review Board. And both the Architectural Review Board and the Planning and Zoning Commission wanted greater architectural review and their expertise of architecture on the Planning and Zoning Commission to help with both the design of commercial projects as well as residential. So the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this and recommended approval, but we wanted to bring it here tonight for your consideration as well and provide feedback, and we take it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then proceed with the Board of Aldermen.
And ARB looked at it as well, correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they knew it. They were attending in the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings and had discussions, and they're here tonight.
Okay.
So they were aware of it, but we didn't have a discussion at the ARB meeting, so.
Okay. Any questions before we recognize Matt and Carl? They'd like to give their input or their thoughts on it? Yeah, go ahead. Or go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I have one question about that. How does this logistically work? Is it still two separate entities, but just meeting at the same time? Because the ARB decisions still need to be done with licensed architects and all of that. It wouldn't be the whole Planning and Zoning Commission that can actually approve residential architectural drawings, right?
It would be the whole Planning and Zoning, so it's the merging of the two boards.
Okay.
So all the ARB members would be merged onto and become part of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And they would
So,
review.
so that means that they'll need to be present for every planning and zoning meeting, whether or not there's a ARB, what do you call it, application or not?
Correct. Because, with the Planning and Zoning Commission, they do the review of commercial projects, so we would, as members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we would want them there to help with that review.
And if they're not present, or only one of them's there or anything like that, that means that the rest of the Planning and Zoning Commission can
They would,
have a say on architectural
yeah,
drawings?
correct. I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission is made up of the decisions based upon those members that are in attendance, as long as we have a quorum. So recently, we've only been able to at least make quorum or just one or two extra. So we needed more people to fill those seats and be able to help guide and move projects forward.
Okay. I'd like to hear from the ARB too.
I have questions, but I don't know how you want to do, if you want questions or if we want to
Yes,
hear
Steve.
from them first.
Well, yeah, I'd like to hear from both of them too, but I'm just trying to get what a meeting looks like in my mind. I'm looking at ARB's agenda, and I've listened in on, and 10:30 at night, they're wrapping up their last house. And I'm thinking, okay, a 7 o'clock planning and zoning meeting followed by ARB, and the sole idea of all this is to try to get a quorum, because we can't get it sometimes at the ARB level. There's going to be people just running out of their room if you're talking about doing
Well, yeah.
commercial then residential.
Well, yeah, so the also reason to move forward with them combining now is we would develop the design guidelines as one entity. As part of that, we would also look at those things that maybe does not really need to be brought forward for the residential side as part of ARB, such as if there's an addition, a sunroom addition at the back of the house. If it's not visible from the public right-of-way and it meets all of the zoning code requirements, and stormwater and runoff and everything else that we check, why does it necessarily, some of these smaller projects, why do they necessarily need to come before the board? So therefore, we would get into that and do those text amendments to kind of help narrow that discussion down and be more efficient in that review. So that kind of thing.
And to establish these guidelines, what's that process?
That is the issuing of a RFQ or an RFP and going through the process and developing and design guidelines. Now, as part of staff's job is for the Planning and Zoning Commission is I complete a staff report. So there are some design criteria that the ARB has articulated. I would try to address those as part of that staff report and try to, follow up with the applicants. We would work with to try to address those beforehand instead of just bringing it before the ARB. So that's until those design guidelines are actually adopted. So.
And then the RFP process, once they,
Recording stopped.
That's me, not.
once that process is determined, or that company is determined,
Recording in progress.
then they go out and go out into the residents are involved in setting those guidelines?
Yeah, so there would be a number of, it's like any public document that is adopted by the city and then incorporated as part of the code or comprehensive plan as design guidelines is, we would issue the RFP, selected a firm to help guide that, have a number of public meetings of what the community wants to see as projects develop, draft that report, have a number of meetings with the ARB and the Planning and Zoning Commission to get it finalized and their recommendation, and then the board would ultimately adopt it.
How long?
That probably would take approximately a year.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Matt and Carl, if you want to give us your thoughts, appreciate it.
All right, so I'm Matt Foreman, Chairman of the Architectural Review Board.
Carl, I think I'm secretary. We're a little loose on that.
Yeah, well. So a lot there, I jotted down a couple of things. And first and foremost, we share both of your concerns. To upscope a little bit, we're in favor of this for a number of reasons. To skip all the way to the end for what Whitney started with a quorum issue. The ARB's small. We do have licensed architects. Part of the reason we have licensed architects is because we don't have a design guideline. So we use our professional judgment to assess the applications that come in. We also don't have the luxury because of it, we don't have a design guideline. We don't get staff reports because Whitney doesn't have anything to judge it against. So we have to do all that on the fly. Also addressing the quorum issue, and with that last comment about it takes a year for the design guideline, Carl and I have both volunteered if they would like us to be on the P&Z and on ARB to solve the P&Z quorum issue for the next year or year and a half while the guideline's written. We both volunteer to do that. We have also been watching commercial projects go up in the Brentwood area that very clearly could have benefited from some professional input. There are things that I know were built differently than what the application was put in for. And, having us there to read drawings, we read drawings, that's what we do. And I think that would benefit P&Z separately from the whole ARB discussion. So to just to complete that thought, we would be happy to volunteer to be added to P&Z, serving dual roles with ARB. We think that's a way to create enough time for the design guideline. So when you look at the text ordinance that was put in place, our only concern is actually about the implementation of blending the two boards. I'll also editorialize a little bit. You're exactly right about the length of our meetings. I guarantee you, the planning and zoning people do not want to sit through our architectural shenanigans. The ability to have a design guideline that governs what actually comes to us will absolutely cut down the load. When I started this 15 plus years ago, we used to look at every single fence that wanted to go up in the city of Brentwood. Thank God we got that off. We also did things like, if you're doing a deck on the back of your house, if it's less than 144 square feet, it doesn't have to come to us. Fine. I think solar panels are in that same category. All these are things we can address with a design guideline. The other piece is, I think, our current staff with new acquisitions with Whitney and other members is, quite frankly, more experienced and more professional than the previous staff. We would love to see the bar raised on making sure the applications actually conform to the requirements. As a board, the Architectural Review Board tends to be very forgiving on things like, oh, you forgot to write down what color your house is going to be. Because we feel it, we know it. We actually sit on both sides of these tables. We present to boards with our own designs and documentation all the time, and we serve on the board. So we know that if you go in and your application doesn't get approved because you didn't write, my shutters will be black, that there's gonna be a pissed off homeowner who's trying to buy a house or build a house. And that I'm more worried about the homeowner than I am about the speculative builder that's just building something. Those guys, you know, they have pain because now they've got another month of interest on their construction loan. Well, next time they're probably going to get the application right if that's the problem. But having the staff have a very clear guideline of what to filter before it gets into the board review process should cut down on the time in the meetings. The other thing we talked about for exactly what Alderman Gould brought up is there is still the ability to send it to subcommittee. So it could be that if there's an applicant that is, shall I say, onerous, we could offline it to a subcommittee meeting. Again, that's going to take time out of the contractor's construction, but that's a possibility. The development of the guideline we feel is absolutely key because I see that as a way that everybody here, planning and zoning, Board of Aldermen, mayor, all the public that will be able to comment on it, can codify and document what our vision for the city of Brentwood will be. We find as talking to people that as you drive down the street, you guys can look at a house and say, I like that one, I don't like that one. For the one that you say, I don't like that, you may not know how to articulate why you don't like that. And that one, it's great, you might like it, but you can't really say, I like it because of this. Again, that's what we do for a living. We have to articulate, communicate, draw, speak. So I think the process of creating a design guideline is going to be very collaborative. We need everybody's input. And on the backside of that, as an architectural review board, that's actually going to give us the confidence to really enforce what we want to see as a city with a confidence level that we are speaking for the city. Right now, honestly, we kind of feel like three architects that are sitting out there doing the best we can. And we're always conscious that if somebody doesn't like our decision, they can appeal to the Board of Aldermen. As far as I know, no one's ever actually appealed. There have been people that have showed up with a lawyer annoyed about something, but that mainly stems from they didn't, even if at the time where they were able to give public comment, they didn't leverage that, or they didn't understand what was being built next door to their house. Communication, again, is key on all of these points. There's some other suggestions. We would love to take the Board of Aldermen in the city magic bus and drive around town and actually say to you guys, look at that, what do you like, what don't you? Let's talk about the guiding principles. The other weakness I see is those guiding principles that are really, I'll say, tribal knowledge. You know, it's what we've been doing on this board since when I joined, when Al Cross was president. We talk about the massing, the material, and how that house fits into the neighborhood context. To the best of my knowledge, those three concepts, those three benchmarks, are not documented anywhere on the city website for developers or designers to see prior to showing up at the board. We would love to be able to have an ordinance out there that manages those expectations and raises the bar on what we're getting. Because right now, what we get in could be all over the map. And for those of you that aren't really aware, the vast majority of the projects that we see, especially the new homes, are actually bought out of catalogs. You just pick one out of the Dream Home catalog, that's the one. We see repeatedly builders that have a few floor plans that they build over and over and over again. So being able to help guide them as to what they're bringing to us could be an advantage across the board. I ran out of thoughts.
That's okay. That's plenty. I'll add a little bit. Just relative to the ordinance, I think I agree. You know, I've not been on as long as Matt, but for a while now. I think relative to this ordinance, my only concerns would be the timing. So I think, and we've discussed this with staff, and it's been a very productive dialogue, I would say. My own preference, and I think the preference of the board, would be to time this merger after the adoption of the design ordinance. And it has to do with your comments as far as like how this meeting would run. It has to do with, just getting it in place, because I worry, I think the quorum issue was, there was one particular issue that happened on our board that it's a long story and it's not worth detailing here.
I would say in 15 years, we've probably had three
missed
times
meetings
where we couldn't meet because Architectural Review Board didn't have quorum.
So certainly for the homeowners affected, it's a big deal, and I wouldn't make light of it for their experience, but I don't know that it's an endemic problem with the board. That said, more members would be helpful. So summarize for my thoughts, it'd be great to have some say over some help really for commercial projects. And given what's going to start happening on Manchester and things, I think that's probably really critical. So that's one thing. The timing for me, get the design ordinance in place, and this is typical of many municipalities around us. So I myself have presented to Webster, I presented to Clayton, I presented, I think, and Clayton, for instance, is very codified, right? Percentage of brick on the front of the house, percentage of brick on the side of the house, right? Gables this way. I'm not even sure we want to go quite that far, but there are plenty of examples of these design guidelines in place, and it would help with the submissions. I prefer that was in place before we merged the boards for the reasons you mentioned. And I think, that's how I would leave it. So, thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, any questions from Dave? Nancy?
But, so some of them you've answered, so thank you for your thoughtful presentation and all your years of service too, because that's a thankless job. So this is maybe a little for Whitney, is the $9,000 cost in here, is that the cost of the design standards?
The board member, the Planning and Zoning Commission members and the ARB received a stipend for when they serve on the board, so that would be the cost, that's the cost to reimburse them when they serve.
If you look further in the narrative, there's a line item under finance operations for salaries and wages of planning and zoning, so it includes everything. Planning and zoning, and then for Board of Adjustment Architecture Review Board, so it's a combination of all three bodies.
That's not really new, I mean, we're already paying that. It's
Right.
not new.
Right. It's not new, it's
not
already in the
new.
budget.
It's not,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Okay, a lot of my issues were, why do this before the design standard? So I feel so strongly that we should not merge these two groups until the design standards are in place. Having gone through ARB and having done additions to our house twice, and having worked with architects and builders, like the experience and the knowledge that you all bring is so vastly different than what a builder brings. And I certainly don't want to lose that for our homes in the interim period where, you're at the P and Z, it could be outvoted, like you two feel so strongly, and then you're outvoted by the rest of the people on P and Z until their design standards. So I think that's really important. I didn't notice anything in the language about ensuring that there remain a certain number of architects on the P and Z. Because I think that would be really important just because we have design standards, we need architects too. So I think that's something that we should add.
I didn't catch that. That's a good catch.
Okay.
Yeah. Since we do rely on volunteers to serve on these boards, I think the goal is always to have people with a design preference, but it's dependent on who we can get to actually serve.
Yeah, so
that's why I think it was left out specific.
Well, I'll go back that I'll go on record now. I don't think I will support this unless there are architects who are on the P and Z. Right now, we have had 3 architects serving on ARB for, 15, how long have we had, the 15-plus years that we've had ARB, and if we have been able to fill that for 15 years and only miss 3 meetings, I think we can find architects to be on planning and zoning, so I would really like that to be in the language.
Yeah.
Stuck forever.
Before you go on, I'm going to address a couple things there. Number one, I think we get paid $25 a meeting. Closer to the mic.
Yeah, because it gets recorded.
So we're getting paid $25 a meeting. It's just kind of always been that way. That's actually not why we do this. So that's kind of a non-issue. There are some other pieces we've been talking with Whitney about. Right now, the Architectural Review Board is licensed architects. We had a brief discussion over how do we expand that. And at least one of the options we do want to implement is retired architects would be good.
Yep. And I'll say when we were discussing this before this merger this thing came up, and I was super supportive of that. And now it's gone off in this separate direction of merging these two commissions, the ARB with the P and Z. But
and there was the residency was the other one.
Yeah.
So I think those are separate short-term measures that could help us or P and Z have more access to licensed architects to help with these issues. Honest to God, there just aren't that many of us.
no, especially in a town of 8,000 people. So do other cities have this combined ARB P and Z model? And
Yes. Stephanie Carr said during the meeting at Planning and Zoning did talk about how the Clayton board serves that, and they'll start the meeting and have one half for the ARB, and then they close that and they go, okay, now we're opening up the Planning and Zoning. I haven't specifically watched those, but she did say they tend to run very well. That's the best example I can give you right now. I mean, do you?
I actually presented to the Clayton board, and it runs
Okay.
describe it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, my concerns would be, you mentioned the outvoting scenario, it's a concern I have, honestly. I would much prefer that people, educated, experienced in the discipline had the say on those topics, so I do worry, and I also honestly do worry a little about conflicts of interest that might arise depending on who is on that board. It could happen, so for instance, if we have a project in Brentwood, which I really have never had, but we have members who have had that, clearly they're not involved in the deliberations and they're, So there's a very clean line there between like what's allowed to happen. So I just would love to make sure that was maintained in any merged board that we went into.
No, we're talking about. No,
No,
we're actually referencing that myself and one of the other board members, Paul Turner, have designed houses being built in Brentwood. So we're
Yeah.
presenting, so literally I will chair a meeting, start the meeting and say, okay, my item is now up. I am recusing myself. I'm switching sides of the table and presenting. And then I don't vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there just needs to be a way that, I think I'm repeating myself, but I would like to avoid any sort of, conflict of interest that might arise.
So then longer term, I don't know if it would happen, but I know the realtors are out with this push to merge all the inspections in the county. I believe it's just inspections, but if that so would that impact P and Z and ARBs, or is it? Okay. And then I guess my last question for the two of you, do you see this as a good solution to, I mean, do you perceive that there's a problem with ARB? Like, if there were design standards for ARB and you could bring in retired architects to help, would that solve a problem? Or do you feel like merging would be good because it adds architectural knowledge to the P and Z?
All of the above. Okay, so having a design ordinance, we would vastly appreciate that as an ARB, just as a standalone item. We've been doing this, we've been getting it done. Can it be done better? Absolutely. I think having Whitney and new staff is gonna be the first step in that period. Having a different benchmark for serving on the board, the retired architects, will also help, period. So as the ARB is status quo, it can absolutely be improved by some of the things we're talking about. ARB has also been asking for years, why aren't we seeing the commercial stuff? And it's just, that was not part of the mandate when we were put in place. We were put in place under Mayor Kelly. There were some really ugly garage front houses being built and people were upset. So that was our first mandate. And it frankly has never gone beyond that. I believe at that time, there was at least, I know my old neighbor was a landscape architect. He was on P&Z. We've had previous ARB members. Rich Obertino went from ARB onto P&Z. But I think at the moment, there's a gap on P&Z. You could probably craft a solution where the ARB saw commercial projects as well, but then it would be detached from the P&Z process. The other side of that is, especially without a design ordinance, some of the architectural review committee residential comments get really granular, and we tend to be very politically correct and try to help and negotiate, literally negotiate with the builders to encourage development, yet encourage good architectural stock. Where it would be a little bit different if we really had a codified ordinance and we could just say, this is terrible, try again. That would be so lovely, but.
I would just add, again, with respect to, I think good work has been done and good work is ongoing to just figure some things out as a way to improve the situation. My main concern was to not fix something that wasn't broken. So if there was something we were doing well, I want to be able to retain the ability to do that well, and I don't want to lose that ability for some other reason, right? So that's the main concern of mine. Whether it was a merged board or whether there was some greater communication between separate boards, I can see different ways this could be written to influence and improve the situation. I think, some of the things you've mentioned, like being removed from review solar panels, for instance, there's fences, there is a category of items that just don't need to be seen, perhaps, that wouldn't, our main baseline goal is to protect property values in the city of Brentwood, right? That's what we're empowered to do. And so a lot of those things would not have an effect on that if they were handled in the code, right? And then leaving that area of discretion, and honestly, I think we have, as a board, have been very pro-development. I I feel, I've maybe voted no one time, in the entire time I've been on the board of 10 years. And that was an egregious case, I had to. But we've been very successful, I think, in harmonizing the efforts and moving it forward. So I don't know that doesn't really need addressing, in my opinion. So somehow, these could be wrapped together in an ordinance, I think, but it feels like it needs some study, and I definitely do not want to see it happen until the design ordinance is sorted out, because I worry about the situation you talked about, so.
And I would add to that one of the fundamental premises you mentioned of protecting property values. We've said a couple of times, people don't like that house. That is very subjective. Except the fact of the matter is, if you really look at the studies, it's been a while since I've seen, and right now the real estate market is just wacky, but people tend to decide if they're buying a house within the first 15 seconds when they pull up at the curb. The fact of the matter is, the garage front snout house, where that garage sits 20 feet out and the front door is 20 feet back, those houses tend to sit on the market longer and sell for less, period. And I haven't seen that study in a while, but I'm sure it's still out there and probably still current. But that is one of those fundamental premises where you start taking the subjective, I don't like that house, and all of a sudden it starts connecting directly to property value.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve.
Now, I pretty much agree with everything Nancy said. I think we're getting the cart before the horse as far as not having these guidelines in place first before we merge these two bodies. Whitney, do you know a ballpark of what an RFP, what type of cost we're looking at coming in as far as?
Well, as part of the budget, I had mentioned $100,000. And that was based upon Clayton has been ongoing with new design guidelines for 2 of their overlay districts, but they get very detailed. And they had spent $100,000 at that time, but they were nearing completion. Bola forwarded me, and I talked to the community development director for O'Fallon, Illinois, and he was like, we already have some residential design requirements, but we're kind of combining them with the commercial. So they issued an RFP, and he was hoping to spend 60, but they didn't indicate that as part of the RFP. But he'd have to wait to see when those responses would actually come in. He is hearing that a lot of the firms are very busy right now, so costs are higher than usual. So I couldn't really say at this point. I think anywhere between like 75 might be a good. I couldn't really say. Yeah, it depends. It would also depend on how detailed we want to get with the residential versus commercial, and how much of we want specifics design to indicate kind of stuff.
And then Mark and Carl, I guess as far as commercial, looking over commercial, I mean, I guess you could almost do that in a 2-step process where it comes for P&Z, Whitney deals with all the things she has to do with the typical, the lot and everything like that. And then it could go on the site plan or something where you guys would pick up, what you know best. So it may be a 2-step process, but it would all happen in a month because you would just refer it to later that month to what's called site plan, but it could be called something else.
And that's what I had referred to. I unfortunately have not had that situation come up yet, so I haven't had how that's worked out. But yes, if a project comes before P&Z and there's still site-related issues, it gets referred to the site plan subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission to work out the bigger issues, and then it would get referred back to the P&Z for ultimate recommendation at the following meeting. So I did, say if we get barred down, that is an option that we could look at, is like, should this be moved 2 weeks later to a subcommittee to work out? So I will say, something that could help with our cost is we have specific requirements with the MC district that we could help carry over. Part of the review I would do would probably start pulling some of that information over, like like with the kitchen conservatory that was recently adopted, it was noted that, yeah, they wanted to increase the EFS. I said it needed to be consistent with the MC district, which was 30%. So those are things that I'm pulling forward and carrying out throughout the city. But that would help with costs, as we already have some of those design ideas in place.
Thanks.
So Bola, Whitney, what do you need from the board? Just reading the room, I don't think anybody is in support of continuing with this until the design guidelines, and I don't mean to put any words in anybody's mouth, but do we need to vote on this and not approve it, or just take no action?
Take no action. I think the goal for tonight was to capture the discussion from this committee, and it would be part of the board packet that will go to the board ultimately. At least that's my initial reaction to it.
All right, so I guess I'm looking for a motion to vote on this, and if nobody makes a motion, then we have taken no action, correct? Is that? All right, seeing no motion, it fails, or doesn't do anything, I guess. All right, hey guys, thank you very much, and just thank you for your time.
So to be clear, this is still going to the board.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, does it go back to P and Z?
I think it has already gone to P and Z.
They're already done with it?
Right, and there's been clarification in how it was presented that,
Okay.
this is coming, to P and Z, not necessarily from the Board of Aldermen. So the purpose tonight was to present this and take stock of your discussion.
Just a note, the discussion at P and Z was very similar to what we just had.
Yeah, Jeff.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this ordinance and work on the design guidelines first.
I don't think that's going to happen. I want to be frank and honest with you. You can make those motions, you can vote on it, it will still be on the Board of Aldermen agenda.
Okay.
And that's okay. I mean, that was my question of like, what do we need to communicate this? I mean, we're all on the Board of Aldermen too, so.
Right, so
we can just talk it out there, I
we'll
guess.
take stock of what was said, but if you want to make a motion, that will be part of the presentation that Whitney gives when it does go to the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah.
So it's going to the Board of Aldermen with a positive recommendation from P and Z and a no action from the committee.
That's exactly what it would happen. If you still want to vote.
Just semantics, does it matter? I mean, we'll talk it out at the Board of Aldermen.
I guess so.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. I do like the magic bus idea, by the way. All right, we'll move on to item 9C, Eager Road. More surveying. Dan?
Well, I think we missed one.
Oh, I'm sorry. 9B. Sorry, I was highlighting the wrong one. EV charging. Sorry, Eric. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Good thing I hadn't started walking up again. So this, in December, the staff was asked to look into converting the EV charging stations at the rec center in a fee-based model. And I think we were also asked to provide some data, especially what other people are doing around the city. And so I kind of listed that there. We get charged about 8 cents per kilowatt hour at the rec center. So in the past, since inception, we dispense 8.184 megawatts of energy. That's to be megawatts, sorry. And so basically the cost would be $654 for the first year. And again, it represents a little under 1% of what we pay for utility costs based on the year-end utility cost. And again, if you look, I provided a graph to you, and what you'll see is that the green line is duration. So you see how the cumulative dispensation, but you also see that in November, December, January, we're trying to get more and more usage. So it is becoming more popular. So there is that. The other thing I presented was basically a quick rundown of this mid-county area and different places that charge or don't charge. And I'll be honest, most of the ones I found were free, including the Heights, Maplewood City Hall, the St. Louis City Streets Department, the City of Kirkwood Community Center, the Maryland Heights 17 Ice Rink, O'Fallon Civic Park, O'Fallon, Botanical Garden, Zoo, Webster University, those type of places. The closest one that charged, what's that? So in Brentwood, there's 4 in, well, actually, there's 3 in Brentwood. 2 are free at the rec center, and Metro Lighting, the supercharger, does charge a fee. And then Auto House BMW right in Maplewood also charges. So those are kind of comparable. So we can easily convert to a fee-based model. I did talk to ChargePoint, who runs that system with us. We basically would look at different things, a pricing structure. Do we want to do it per energy cost or by time, like a per minute, per hour cost? Session cost. Some places say, hey, if it's for 2 hours or 1 second, you get charged $2.50, $3.50, $5 fee. And then last is, do we want to charge a minimum? My recommendation and hers recommendation would be just to charge the energy cost, since that seemed to be the biggest concern. So that's this informational. I hope it's what the information hopefully you guys wanted.
Great, questions, comments? Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to just charge the energy cost. You know, just like anybody else that goes to fuel their vehicle, it's a nominal cost to the user. So I don't think it discourages the fact that they're going to use it because they need the infrastructure. But I don't think it's something that the taxpayers really, the money of the taxpayers should really continue to pay for. So, I mean, I'd support converting it and just charging each person for whatever they use.
I'll second that.
All right, we got a motion from Jeff and a second from Steve. Yeah, Nancy?
So this charge point, is there a fee for us to pay to charge point to have the meter or whatever? Meter's probably the wrong word, but
Yeah, we pay an annual fee to ChargePoint for basically not the infrastructure, it's the wrong word, the cloud-based system that be able to use it. And that cost is about $300 per station. So we pay about $1,200 a year.
Okay, so we'd be paying more money than we already pay now.
No, I'm sorry, we pay that already. The city's currently paying that. That was part of the installation fee.
Oh, so charge point's already there. They just have something you can flip on to
Yes.
to make people pay.
Correct.
Okay, I misunderstood I thought we were adding something.
Yeah, Steve?
But there's an annual fee of $1,200 we're paying,
Yes,
besides supplying the electricity.
correct.
That's news to me. Is there any way to set that, have ChargePoint maybe up it a little more than just the usage to cover that fee annually?
We could either charge a session fee or we could charge a little bit more per kilowatt hour. You can charge 10 cents. I think I mentioned in there, seems like the median is somewhere between 10 and 30 cents with the average to be 18. So you could go somewhere in that range.
I would amend the motion to include, in your discussion, include how that would be covered. I mean, I don't think the city needs to make money on this, but should cover our costs to allow it to happen.
Second amendment.
Yeah, Nancy?
So I'm a little torn on this, but the city's doing a lot of things now that are sort of an investment in, like, being a great city. And we're building this amazing, now $90+ million thing. We're putting in a destination, I don't know, you had some funny word.
Play
but
Planet, I'm calling
Play
it.
Planet, as
Bigger than a
Brandon has
playground.
termed it. That's for the whole region, and it's not just for Brentwood residents. And I feel like we're making a lot of investments in being a great city, and I think some of the things that being a great city is being at the forefront of things. And we're not the only city that provides this. I'm certainly not in favor of charging more and recouping the fees for this. So I think this is sort of, we need to think about what we want Brentwood to be.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm not in favor yet of charging for this. I think there will be a point, probably when somebody who works in that parking lot realizes they can charge all free for all day, that we will need to start charging. I think this is a thing that brings people into the rec center. This is, you're there for ice skating practice, and hey, there's a charger there, that's great. And I think it possibly leads to more attendance and room rentals, so there's probably an upside financial side on this. You know, I wouldn't support free charging at the Play Planet if we're gonna put things in there in the future, just because that's a different thing, so. And also, you know, you look around, I was shocked by how many places around are not charging. I was walking around the Richmond Heights trying to figure out if that was free or not, and then I don't speak charge points, so I couldn't figure it out, so I appreciate that information. So I'm not in favor of charging yet, but I think at some point we will, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the structure itself is what is the draw. The fact that the infrastructure is there and that you are able to use it. So I think regardless of whether you're being charged $2 to charge your car while you're there, or it's free to you as a user, I think the value that you get out of it is already intrinsically there. So I would argue that, you know, you'd still use it. You'd still be, you know, drawn to come into the rec center, even if you had to pay, you know, $2, $3 for your session. So I don't, it's, again, the cost to the user is insignificant. I think it's more of a principle of, you know, using the community taxpayer money to fund people's individual, you know, charging of their cars, I think is a little bit of a, you know, I was all for it because of the reduction of costs and everything that we got from Ameren, and to get it going, to see, hey, are people going to use it? Now we know people are using it, and that's great. I think it's time that we start to look at, you know, charging people for their usage. And I'm fine with if it's just the usage that kilowatt hours that they have. I'm fine with that, and it's a cost to the city for just the benefit and value of having those there for the charge point. I get that. I would be totally for just charging for the usage that they use, and that's it.
Yeah, Steve?
I'm just responding to emails that I've received and conversations that I've had. You know, why are we supplying free fuel to electric vehicles? And so that's why I think we ought to start charging for them. I think it's anecdotal that somebody's going skating just because they see a charging station out in front of the rec center. I don't think that's drawing them. I just think it's a convenient use. And it's really convenient if it's not you're not having to pay for it. So I would rather see them at least cover our cost of supplying that, as minimal as it is. I just think it's, you know, once again, the same discussion I had with the Dining Alliance. I just don't see why we're using public funds for private use.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, so just to make sure we understand fully what the motion is, so the amendment was to increase, maybe restate it for me, make sure we got it.
I'm fine with if that was just because we didn't hear that weren't aware that we were getting charged an annual fee for this thing. So I think that was new information. I mean, I think the main motion still stands, and if I need to, you know, repeal the amendment, that's fine in order for it to get approved. But the main motion is to start the process of turning on ChargePoint so that users pay for their kilowatt hours that they use, and however that breaks down cost.
Okay, does that concur with your second?
Yeah.
All All right, why don't we do a roll call on this?
Could
Oh,
I ask
sorry,
a
Nancy, go ahead.
question about that? So if this passes and it passes at the board, could we, I know it's hard to look with your graph because it hasn't been there that long and there's been a spike the last couple months, but could we like look at this in a year and, if we start charging and if there's like the usage is way down and we have this resource for the community that no one is taking advantage of, then maybe we would want to reconsider. We could always reconsider. So could we just, I don't know, I'd just like to clarify that we would look, if it passes, that we would look at this like in a year, next January.
Yeah, we can always provide usage reports at a Public Works Committee.
You're looking at it anyway, so on a monthly basis, same time last year, we could easily start doing that for you on a going forward basis, and then when we see a trend, well, it's time to have a discussion.
Yeah, we just even include that in weekly reports too.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, Kelly, let's do a roll call.
Okay. Chairman Waggy,
No.
Alderman Gould,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Right.
Motion carries by a vote of 3-1.
All right, thank you, Eric. All right, now, Dan, I was so eager to get the surveying again.
This one's pretty straightforward. If you recall, back in November, we were asked to take a look at the dead end of Eagle Road. This would be the westernmost dead end in Brentwood Forest. So currently, if you look at the photograph, Eagle Road dead ends, there's a white fence guardrail with some reflectorized warning devices on there. And we were asked to figure out, do we even own it? Over the years, we've always maintained that. We've shared the duties with Richmond Heights, actually, but this particular area was kind of a black hole. We didn't know if we owned it or not. So if you recall, we had the survey contract open with TWM. We added to it, and that was that Board of Aldermen meeting on November 15th with that resolution we added to their work. In December, they went out and surveyed it and came to the conclusion that that does belong to the city of Brentwood. So if you look, there is an exhibit from TWM. It's the Richmond Heights portion was vacated, and it lists the deed book and page and ordinance number. But the resident at 89 Chafford Woods, I believe it's actually 87, but 87 and 89 Chafford Woods, the same owner, actually owns that chunk that used to belong to Richmond Heights. So the only thing left on Eagle Road is our 25-foot portion, and then the 25-foot portion that runs north and south adjacent to York Village. It's kind of unknown as to who owns that. Years and years ago, it was the city's, but I don't know if anything changed with MoDOT, because that actually ran all the way up to I-64 and ran parallel to it, and then connected in at McKnight, when McKnight was actually Lay Road at that area. So it's kind of a weird routing, but long story short, it belongs to us. We can maintain it. At one time, we thought maybe it was even Brentwood Forest, but it's ours. I don't know if you have any questions.
Any questions for Dan? You're going to get the bottom of all these land mysteries in
Right.
Brentwood at some point.
Yeah, that was an easy one. So
You want to get rid of it?
if you wanted to, I mean, there's that option too.
Want to offer it to Brentwood Forest and not have to maintain it? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know if they jump at that, but that is an option. Yeah.
oh, okay.
We need to
yeah.
know, what it is first, right?
Bargaining chip. I don't, never mind.
Yeah, usually I'd say every other year we're back there pulling weeds.
Okay, and no motion is necessary. This is informational.
No, it's for information, to let
Okay.
you know we closed the loop on it. We received the results and it's all filed and
Yep.
don't need to do anything else.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, move on to 10A, optional streetlight receptacles. Dan?
MoDOT, is doing the improvements along Manchester Road, and one of the submittals that they provided to us is the decorative streetlights. We always plan on decorative streetlights along our corridor of Manchester Road as part of Brentwood bound and part of our vision for that area. The one thing that's optional is a GFI receptacle mounted near the top of that post. Right below the luminary, right below the light itself, you could put an optional receptacle. That optional receptacle, of course, takes additional wiring, metering, a bunch of other things. You can see the breakdown that Meyer Electric put in there. So it's a total of 92 lights, of course, 92 GFI receptacles. And then it lists, of course, the covers and then the wiring sizes, 4,000 feet of wiring, essentially. And then it needs to be grounded, and then it lists other modifications too. So overall, it would increase the cost to us another $136,009.65 if we decide to go with that optional receptacle on the 92 lights. The lights, you can see in the drawing, it's on either side of Manchester, basically from Bremerton to Hanley, the entire corridor in Brentwood. What it would allow you to do is if you wanted to plug in decorations or just run a extension cord from one of the lights for whatever reason, you have that option. If you don't want to do it, it doesn't really do anything other than we'd have to tell MoDOT whether we want them or not. And this would be a change order to the MoDOT contract. We're already paying MoDOT to put the regular lights in. This would just be a change that adds that receptacle.
Hey, Dan,
I spoke with Navigate, and they said it would be coming out of contingency.
we had the same discussion on Hanley Industrial when we were putting streetlights
We
in
did.
there as well.
Yes.
And we chose not to put receptacles on, correct?
Correct, because we didn't know when we would ever add decorations and what we would ever do with it, and it was actually less than this, when I did the math. I did look it up, it was like 30,000 back then, but it was just along Strasser, it wasn't the whole area like by Brentwood School District or Hoffman Brothers, it was just a handful of lights.
Yes, Steve, you have a question, comment?
Why so expensive? I mean, that's crazy cost.
Right, it's a separate circuit, it's not just the regular lighting circuits, it's its own circuit, it has its own meter base.
Have we bought these lights already?
No, they haven't placed the order, they need to place the order, so they need a decision that, either you want the receptacle or you don't, and then they'll place the order.
I know, but do they sell lights that already have this feature built into the pole?
This would be built in from the factory, they would just put that receptacle in there, it's just a knockout that they would remove, and then the receptacle goes in there and the wiring goes down the post.
But to adapt that to, is this?
I know they said it would be more expensive if you did it later. If you did a change order 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and wanted this, it would be more than the
Want to put
136.
Christmas tree lights on there? Do they make solar Christmas tree lights?
I actually
Yeah.
did look that up. I figured somebody would ask that. They do. They just don't last that long. It of course requires sunlight or something to recharge it, and usually they'll burn for like 6 to 8 hours.
Well, my personal opinion, it seems pretty expensive.
Sounds like a motion to me.
Second.
So the motion is to not put the receptacles in. Oh, yeah, Carl, why not? Yeah, you're a city employee, so why not? They get paid.
You wouldn't necessarily have to do 92 of them if you want a particular area, like if you said, well, I only went from Brentwood Boulevard to pick a street, Cecilia. You could just do that area, and then they could readjust this change order and figure out which of those would. Right. I would keep the distance short because I know that the meter is dependent upon the length and you can't push electrons infinitely far. So the shorter you can bring the run, in theory, the price would go down.
It's been like 5 years since we made that decision in Hanley Industrial. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and said, man, we really screwed that up?
But this is a different area, and that's the difference. I think this is an opportunity to highlight the area. And, if the city had had a response from a developer already, then this could be built into maybe what is developed. And I think there's still potential for that. But I don't know if you've traveled far and seen how communities light up, key areas of their town during holiday season. I hope that's not lost on us for that region. And maybe the discussion, if you vote this down now, then it's something you might want to put upon a developer. But then we might not have that time.
Right. Yeah, MoDOT needs to know sometime in February before they place the order.
I think this is a now or never thing because I don't know how you build the infrastructure into the wiring if you don't put these in place now. So if we're gonna do a certain area, we gotta know now. I mean, we gotta make. And I hate to throw everybody west of Brentwood under the bus, but I could see us doing east of Brentwood, maybe on the south side where the development's going to occur. Maybe, I don't know how many lights that would be.
I'd have to take a total, I don't know off the top of my head.
Then maybe, as Carl said, every other one of those. I
Yeah,
don't know.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'm maybe more encouraged to hear that maybe we could be more limited in how we would apply this and more deliberate, because especially if this, my question to you was going to be, are there other value that you would receive out of this than just holiday decorations? Is there anything that for the department that you go, hey, you know what, it would help with X, Y, and Z, and that's why, you know, is another reason to do something like this? I just struggle with having all of them, the expense of all of them equipped with it for something that we, especially the cost of implementing it, to, you know, just for potential of some lights that we might put up for a couple
Yeah,
of
the only
months.
other option I thought was if you were doing maintenance and you didn't have a generator with you, you know, of course you'd need a ladder because it's probably 9, 10 feet in the air. I don't know if Eric would plug something into it. I don't know.
I mean, we could, and this would be Karen's dream, to kind of showcase different things and things like that. I would agree with some of the assessment that's been made that we probably don't need every other light. Every third light would probably be just as good, to kind of highlight things. But we could definitely create more than just a Christmas or holiday thing. We could probably do something year-round with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of looking at the district and saying, okay, where's the most developable part? Where's sort of you know, the gateways in and out of that town center type of feel, that makes sense. But all the way up to Bremerton and all the way, it just seems excessive. So I would like to see maybe a plan, a more deliberate plan versus just all or nothing.
Do we have time for that, or is there time of the essence now? I mean, the
Yeah, I
sidewalks
can
are
ask
going in.
MoDOT if you want, and then figure out, I don't know if you're more comfortable with a certain dollar amount, or if we just say, hey, it's on the south side, because I mean, once you start crossing the road, you're gonna increase the expense too.
If you're open to a meeting, it could be the only item on the agenda. As soon as Dan has that information, we can bring that back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like your idea of the south side, just in that section between Manchester and Hanley. I like that. And so could I ask another? I mean, sorry, Brentwood and Hanley, yeah, on Manchester.
yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
So when you mentioned Karen, I thought of it. Has there been talk of putting like the flower baskets, like when you're down by Barnes Jewish and Children's, with the water coming up, or is that done later?
We're looking at a number of things to kind of highlight Manchester corridor once it's done. Some of the things that are being done through construction, I mean, they're even putting planters, boxes in certain parts of the sidewalk area. So, I mean, that is being discussed, and obviously we're having discussions. Karen's looking at that now and seeing how we can kind of do everything along with everything else that we do.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table.
I'll resend that.
Okay, and then do we have clear direction to the staff of what we want to try and do there? So it would be the south side of Manchester, east of Brentwood Boulevard, and then come back to us with that.
Nice cost.
Yeah,
It doesn't even have to be every light.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks, Dan.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to 10B, trash bags.
All right, switching gears, something fun. This came about a couple of meetings ago. We were asked why single family gets to leave out plastic bags, trash bags, versus multifamily Brentwood Forest has to put it in receptacles. So what I tried to do was highlight the similarities and differences between the two. You know, They are different. They're different by the county ordinance, they're different by our definitions and the service levels that they receive. So I tried to put together a little table just to kind of highlight the differences and similarities between the two. So like refuse, regular trash is collected 2 times a week at Brentwood Forest at no charge. Residents provide receptacles, or they should. It's in the county ordinance. Single family, they get 1 time per week at no charge. If they want a second collection each week, it's a total of $20 a month, and the resident can either provide a receptacle or use trash bags. For yard waste, both of them receive yard waste. However, single family, it's 1 time per week. There's no charge. They leave it out on Wednesdays. With yard waste at Brentwood Forest, Greenwood Group picks up whatever leaves, clippings, puts them in a roll-off dumpster over on Swallow, and the city pays for the cost of that dumpster. It's a roll-off, so you only pay whenever a new one's brought in and the old one's collected. So it's not like you're paying a monthly fee or anything just for it sitting there. It's only when it's picked up and the new one's delivered. Recycling, we provide everybody with a receptacle. So if you're Brentwood Forest, if you're single family, you get a receptacle, you get 1 time per week, and that's that. And then bulk items, each of those, Ward 4 is Brentwood Forest, and then all the other single family elsewhere, 1 time per month. First Friday of the month is Ward 1, second Friday, so on and so forth. You can schedule a bulk item pickup. We charge the same amount regardless of multifamily or single family. A couch would be $15, for example. So I tried to highlight similarities, differences, and then I threw some pictures in there. You can see what it looked like prior to receptacles in Brentwood Forest. So they just kind of threw all the trash bags in little clumps. There was no designated area. I always thought maybe there would be like a marking on the curb that would tell you where to put it, and there was no rhyme or reason. It was just kind of convenient wherever the groups of buildings were. They just threw it in a pile. I guess whoever threw the first bag, that's where the rest of them landed. And then, you can see it was just kind of everywhere. And then squirrels, birds, any kind of, critter, I guess, could rip a bag open and leave trash. And that's what started the whole receptacle for Brentwood Forest. Richmond Heights contacted the Department of Public Health. Department of Public Health looked at it and said, well, you should be putting in receptacles. That was back in 2020. By October of 2020, Brentwood Forest was supposed to have their residents use receptacles. By the end of 2020, we stopped picking up bags. We, being Public Works, we would just leave the bags so that they would pick them up, and the management team would pick it up. And they don't like that because it's costing them money and labor and as well as disposal. And then I've just kind of highlighted like a couple different areas where it seems like it's the same group of buildings that keeps leaving the occasional bag or two. So like this sign that you can read in the background at Wrenwood, it's that same group. There's always a couple bags. Even some of the receptacles they put don't conform to the county. They either are missing a lid, never had a lid. I've seen like just a storage tote, like you'd put Christmas lights in, they'll throw that out there. That's their receptacle. There's no specification or standardization for receptacles. It's whatever you have, you use. But I know that Brentwood Forest is looking into doing something. They don't want to shoulder the cost of their management team doing the extra work. And like I said, Public Works, we just don't pick up the bags. We pick up the receptacles, empty those, empty the recycling. They get trash on Mondays and Thursdays, and elsewhere they only get it 1 time per week. So this was more or less for informational purposes. I didn't really have any action on this, and there's also the city attorney legal opinion on this. I know we discussed that before. I don't know if you're receiving any calls from your constituents about this being an issue. And would you even want to consider switching over to all receptacles? I know there are single families I've driven around, like tomorrow will be a trash day. Typically I see them on Rosalie. It's usually empty nesters or maybe the person's single. There might be 1 bag versus 20 of them in a pile. So for us to pick up that one, almost everybody else that's single family uses a receptacle because they have to hold on to it for a whole week. So I don't know if I know I talked to the county. The county said we as the hauler could be more restrictive if we wanted to. We could tell everybody that they have to use receptacles. Usually it's done when you have a private hauler because they have an automated collection system. So they want to grapple onto the cart, empty it, put it back. They don't want to leave the cab, grab a bag, throw it in there and do that. It's just too time consuming. But he said what we're doing now with single family conforms to the county ordinance. We don't have to change anything if we don't want to.
All right, questions, thoughts?
Information.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to digest, I didn't know.
Yeah, Jeff?
I just have one comment, I guess. So I'm not quite sure what the ask is if we made everybody, even single families, use a receptacle, which you said majority already do.
Right.
That still doesn't solve any problems in Brentwood Forest.
Correct.
So the problems in Brentwood Forest are Brentwood Forest issues of not complying. Okay. Just want to make sure I had that straight.
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah, Steve.
Do we pick up the dumpster that they have at their
Oh, at the
clubhouse?
Yes, we do. It's a rear load. We grapple onto it with the back of the truck, empty it, and put it right back.
Why?
It's always been done. I haven't changed it. I
We
just know
found we were only supposed to be doing that during pool season,
Right.
but it's now year-round.
Once I get back to my little rant, I guess, that, you know, I could see why we're picking up residents' trash. I don't understand why we're dumping a dumpster. Do we supply the dumpster through public?
Yeah, the dumpster that's at the clubhouse is ours. The dumpsters that are used for yard waste, those are, I believe, Waste Management.
I mean, it sounds to me that that's the condo association should contract with their own hauler to pick up that.
Do we pick up the dumpster at Hanley Station, the other condo complex in Brentwood?
No.
Right.
I would maybe just, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do any, let's move on. I think that needs to be pointed out. They're a little upset with our trash service.
Has been pointed out, we were hoping that maybe there would be representation from the Board of Managers here tonight. And there isn't. We have talked long, Dan and I, with the mayor, with the alderpersons from Ward 4, and I know that they were trying to come up with a solution to some of this, that perhaps if the city were to relax its requirement, but we can't since we're following county guidelines. And Dan has come up with all kinds of suggestions that maybe they could make the residents pay for a particular size cart, or that they could put a dumpster somewhere for maybe each unit, you know, or buildings. But those suggestions have been met with a, what?
I'd say just a negative comment.
Okay,
like
then.
just that it
That's a
either can't be
non-starter.
done- Right,
Yeah.
right. Because I thought, well, if you had 4 units together, what if you just did a single or maybe 2 96-gallon, like large receptacles? But the question becomes, well, where do you put it? Per their bylaws, you can't store it around the building because it's common ground that belongs to the HOA. You can't put it on your balcony. It needs to go somewhere. And like in the storm event we had last week, if you've got snow around the wheels or even underneath, you drag that thing up to the second floor. Now what? It's got snow melting on it. You're probably not going to put it in your condo unit. You know, I thought, well, could you change the bylaws? You'd create an area of storage in the back, side, whatever, you know.
Something they need to work out.
I think that's probably what's also fueling this discussion for Brentwood Forest. They told us how much more they're having to pay. Is it monthly or annually, like $35,000 or something like that?
I would hope that it's annually.
Annually. So they're looking to reduce that cost to their bottom line, which is why I think they believe that it's the city's responsibility to help them solve this problem.
Well, as what I can see from the chart here, they're getting 2 trash services that I don't, as a resident, get. We're allowing their groundskeeping to put clippings in a dumpster that we dump for them, at the city cost, right?
Correct.
Because they don't, we all get lawn clippings picked up at the curb, so I can kind of feel them there. But and now I'm learning that we're dumping their dumpster. I think we're doing quite a bit, and I think the rest of the issues they're having with plastic bags needs to be dealt with at their board level.
Yeah, and they just kind of wanted us, like, if there's bags there, just go ahead and pick them up, but then that really is setting a bad precedent, because the people that are following the rules and providing a receptacle, why are they following that when you're still picking up the bags?
Yeah, I don't think we want to reinforce that bad behavior in Brentwood Forest. And then also, I thought we were inconsistent, but then, reading this about bags are allowed, as long as they're between 20 and 35 gallons or whatever, for single family. So that's in compliance with the county. So I think we should continue to pick those up. I don't see them around the neighborhoods very often. I think they're very one-off here and there. And so I think we should continue to do that. And I think we are consistent by doing that. Okay, we want to. All right, we'll move on to item C, request from Brentwood Forest Board of Managers.
Yeah, and that kind of, we dealt with a little bit of that in the last discussion, so it's just kind of informing you of where they are and where they feel they should be, as far as that they feel that they are not really demand, but they would like more service, in the sense that we would somehow offset some of their management fees and operations costs. They did actually come up with a door hanger idea, so that they would put door hangers out where they see, because they said, well, when I drive around on Thursdays, I tend to see the same areas that are violating versus the other areas that are consistently keeping with the receptacles. So I said it's probably just isolated to those 1 or 2 buildings that touch those bags. If you would somehow reinforce that to the neighbors that are around that area, that they need to all conform, maybe someone will tell you who's violating it, which house number. I think that it's probably isolated to 1 or 2 people in a unit, and I'm sure the people that live there know who it is when they see them take it out Sunday for Monday's pickup.
Steve, any comments, questions?
No,
Sorry, I thought you were raising your hand.
No, I dug a hole deep enough last time. So.
Okay, this is information only, so thank you.
Correct.
Okay, one last thing, Madden Fest. In my household.
It's the only household.
It's the only household.
So obviously, staff has been thinking about the future of everything we do with Brentwood Park coming online. And it's been staff's thought that obviously Brentwood Days, Madden Fest, if we go back to old school, site celebration should be moved down into the new Brentwood Park. It just makes sense to kind of showcase that. In addition, it has different things that would be beneficial. It has the amphitheater that could be used for kids' activities or magic acts, things like that. We'd already have the event lawn for the band. We could utilize the pavilion for indoor-outdoor stuff. Even some of the wear and tear shouldn't be as bad, because there's pathways that would get you from A to B instead of just walking right through the middle of the field. So with the success of last year's Brent Yard Backyard Bash, we thought it might be a good idea to kind of formulate this now and see if we can move that into the future, of maybe even saying how to make that even better to kind of take over. The biggest reasons, as I mentioned, is one is Brentwood Park. We just want to be there. Two is carnival rides are a killer. They are big, they are heavy, they tear up all of our grass, and it has become an issue with Brentwood Park over the years of how much damage has been done. We try to repair it the best we can, and then it all gets torn up the next September during Brentwood Days. So we obviously would not want to do that down at the new park, and there's really no good area either, unless you take up the entire event lawn, and again, you're ruining that, then there's no place for the band. There's all sorts of things. We've looked at this a few times trying to figure it out. The other reasons, as I kind of mentioned, and I'll just go through this pretty quickly, if we do move to the new park, we can actually start doing turf restoration in Brentwood Park, real turf restoration, and changing the composition of what is basically compacted clay at this point that we can't really get rid of until we do something. Safety, the fire department and the police department both mentioned that they liked the idea, and they put the letters attached. The cost is probably the least important reason, but we did, you think about the difference, the carnival rides is the big one, but we have generators out there for electric, we have the table and tents and chairs that we wouldn't need, and then those vendor booth rentals, you know, we wouldn't be. Those are the reasons. It's our recommendation that we do this. You know, it should lead to a lot of discussion.
I guess one question I'm confused, Eric. I mean, we're talking about 2023 in the new Brentwood Park, but is this the plan for 2022, which would be back in the old Brentwood Park?
I think we could look at it two ways. I mean, we started with a good event last year. Do we continue that one more year and then push it off to, or move it then in 23? There's, you know, if you want to have one last bash, you know, Brentwood, the old school Brentwood days before we move, we could, you know, have that as well. We just start the recovery of Brentwood Sports Complex later. The reason to discuss this now is if we want to do something similar to last year, we really, about March, start having those conversations with electric companies and the carnival rides and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Nancy.
So I have two comments. My first is sort of anecdotal, and I'm sure my children are glad that they're old enough to have been able to go to the old style Brentwood days until they outgrew it. So it's sort of a sad thing to think about not having Brentwood days with carnival rides. But if we're gonna move it to the new park and there aren't gonna be carnival rides there, we've had COVID that's come in and it's given us the opportunity to rethink sort of everything we do in every facet of life. And so maybe that's the time to rethink this event now rather than going back to carnival rides and then not doing carnival rides and then you have a whole mess next year. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the Brentwood Backyard Bash was a very successful community event. And I think it was, we assembled small amount of activities to do some things. I think you certainly could be more ambitious and take on a few more activities, maybe some more booths and food and all of that. And that would actually enhance from last year to this year. But I agree, I don't know that you bring back carnival rides and then only to know moving forward, you're not gonna wanna recommend carnival rides from here on out. It seems like that would be worse than just saying, hey, from here on, we're, you know, changing the format of our celebration. And that would be, I would support your recommendation as long as it was not just recreating what was done last year, but to sort of ideate and bring a little bit more enhancement to it.
No, and you think about, again, I've already forgotten the term for Alderman Wiggy, but the playground, the destination playscape, is being able to utilize that as a feature as well. Think about scavenger hunts, boat races, duck races, you know, all those type of things that we can do with that as well. The amphitheater gives us opportunities. We can do a family fun run in the morning, kind of leading up to the event before the parade, utilizing the trails. I mean, there's also, we're already percolating, but, you know, we want to make sure that's what the city wants to do before we go crazy and do that.
Yeah, Steve.
I agree. We're kind of we've weaned ourselves away from the carny rides. So I'm going to miss the carny folk, but I agree with the other two aldermen.
I'm gonna miss those carnival rides too. I don't know, had a like county fair kind of like je ne sais quoi to it. So, but just so I understand, so this reimagining, if we forward this on and it's approved, this is what we would do in 2022.
That would be our recommendation, yeah.
But it would be in the old Brentwood Park.
Correct.
For one more year and then moving over.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're looking for a motion to
So moved.
accept the recommendation of Eric.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Jeff, second by Nancy. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 11, citizen comment.
Evening, everyone. Coming up here now, it seems like it's kind of a weekly or monthly thing, but it's nice to be involved. So first, I want to say to the Public Works, thanks for all your guys' work last week with the snow. I know it was a lot of work, multiple days, and you still got trash done by Friday, so It was a lot of work, and my wife and I actually walked out and gave the guys hot chocolate. So it was great. We really appreciate it. They were struggling, getting stuff through snow and just everything related to that. So it was a lot of work, and I think they did a great job. I just want to make a couple comments on some of the topics going on tonight. And there was a lot of stuff. I kind of read through the agenda, but it's like, holy cow. So I'll kind of go back through my quick notes here. I totally agree about charging for the EV. I think that that's a good plan, and I think that that's a simple math calculation that, we have a year's worth of service. We can divide that by the kilowatts and then what we used last year, and then if that's a half a cent onto that device to cover that $1,200, I guess my one question was the $1,200 for 12 of those charging units, or is it just for one charging unit? How is that fee allocated? And so that way we're covering that. So in the future, if it's $1,200 for 4 of them, or if it's $1,200 for each individual charging station for that software, just to making sure we're covering that fee in total. But it makes sense. If you can afford a $60,000 car, you can afford $2 to charge it while you're playing hockey or whatever you're doing with your kids. ARB, I think that's a great idea to really combine those two scenarios with the planning and zoning. But I couldn't agree more with coming up with a basis. As a general contractor and doing it for 25 years, I worked in municipalities where you have a basis of design that you kind of have to meet, and it kind of eliminates that gray area when you're walking. You're like, oh man, I hope this is going to pass, or I have no idea what I'm walking through. So I think that's a really good idea, and coming up with that before this is implemented together is really important for you guys to not have to work till 11 o'clock and waste the contractors, and I don't really care about the developers coming in, but the homeowner that's just trying to get an addition on the front of their house or a new front porch, oh, you can't, we really want white vinyl pickets and we don't want black wrought iron. Just stuff like that goes through that decision process, that there's some sort of a guideline. I think that'll just kind of save the head scratching. The thing I was a little concerned about tonight is it was a great presentation, but it seemed to be pointless because it went through Committee of Planning and Zoning for approval, and then it got presented here, and then there was no vote of approval to then continue it to the board. So I guess my question is who does ARB represent and work for? Are you under Public Works, or are you under Planning and Zoning? And if you're independent, then the whole point of this discussion tonight was kind of futile, because my understanding is how this works as committees is that the approval kind of needs to come from the committee to then continue it to the aldermen as a recommendation to vote on. So it seemed like it was a lot of information relayed for no real action or approval or disapproval from this particular committee. And so it just seemed kind of futile, but the discussion was very important and I think very thoughtful, and it exposed a lot of situations, and I learned a lot about that process. And so I appreciate your guys and Planning and Zoning on how that works. I think it's important, especially with Brentwood Bound, that we establish some design criteria for that commercial area so that we don't have a guy building a 200-unit place that's totally different than the next place. And he's like, well, I don't have to follow a guideline because I don't have a guideline. So I think that's important. To the lights along Manchester, I think that's great. I think that's a cool idea. But I also think that, every other light's a good discussion, but I also think we're missing, how much is it going to cost for all those Christmas decorations on top of that? And then what's the operational cost each year for the taxpayer? So besides just the infrastructure putting in, what's the bigger picture of that investment besides just putting in outlets? So I think that information also should be shared with the board and the alderman when it comes up, so that as community and as taxpayers, we really know what we're paying for in the end picture out of all that. My last thing I wanted to bring up is the Kirkland Webster Times came out last week, and it's a great newspaper. And there's an article in here about the closure of Manchester Brentwood coming up this weekend here. And I'm highlighting this because Alderman Gould and I are really the closest ones. I know Alderman Wegge lives within the neighborhood, but Eulalie is closed now for sewer work. Alderman Gould and I live right off of Dorothy Avenue. In the paper, no official detour route will be marked by MoDOT. Currently driving around, there's a bunch of yellow light up signs that say Manchester's going to be blocked. So ultimately, starting Friday night, all through the weekend, Manchester traffic has no idea, and coming eastbound on Manchester, you're coming through commercial, you got some opportunity to turn around before you have to come through a residential district. There's gonna be no formal signage, no traffic control barriers presenting semis, dump trucks, all that general traffic who's not gonna pay attention to the rest of that sign because there's too much other flashy stuff going on. And guess what? They're coming down Dorothy with vehicles over 18,000 pounds, driving through our neighborhood in a hurry because now they are inconvenienced by Manchester being closed. And I feel like, and I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like this weekend we're gonna have a major traffic problem within our neighborhoods on Helen and on Dorothy trying to come through. And they're gonna make that first right and they'll be like, where the heck do I go? I don't know where I'm going here. Do I go left here on Henrietta? Do I cut through this neighborhood? Do I go all the way up to Eulalie? Or do I turn on Litzinger? So is the city, the police department involved in this? Are the public works involved with detour signage, telling people to continue going straight, this road not through? And then when we end up with that traffic jam, how is the fire department getting through to all those people when we have a traffic jam out here everybody trying to get out onto Brentwood Boulevard? So I'm curious what plans, because ultimately this Brentwood Bounds is a public works project supported by the aldermen and by the community, but what information and what pre-stages and prep has been done for this? And this is the first time, and we're about to, get into a shit show here with all this traffic, and then by the time Manchester is shut down at the other end of Hanley, we're gonna be really dealing with the traffic problems. So this is kind of our first test, and I'm curious and I'm concerned about the end result of what's gonna come after this weekend. A lot of people use that path, a lot of kids, people with dogs, and God forbid if something happens this weekend by somebody speeding through there. It happens now with Brentwood residents not stopping at those stop signs. And when we end up with a traffic jam in there, and people are pissed and they're driving up and down our streets and just hitting cars and just bent out of shape because they don't know where to go. So I'm just curious how Public Works and how the police and everyone is going to handle this weekend, and is there any plan in place to try and control traffic and to maybe limit the dump trucks and the schnook semi with the food service coming to Manchester and be like, oh, I can't go through, I can't turn around in Manchester, so now my only opportunity is drive down Dorothy and then somehow make these turns on these side small streets. So that's really it, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks for your comments. If anybody wants to respond. I'll just say, Brian, the fire and the police met with MoDOT on Monday of last week. So originally it was going to be closed last weekend, and they pushed it out 1 week because of weather. And the feedback from that meeting was that the police and fire were comfortable with the situation. And basically MoDOT said it's since it's a local closure, it's one road. They don't typically detour around that, but it will be interesting to see. That's for sure. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I know at public safety, the fire chief and the police chief. The fire chief has notified surrounding municipalities about the closures, and Abbott ambulance, I know that you've seen come through. So I know that there is a plan, they've got their plan together for it.
And I understand that they all have their plan to help get to an emergency when somebody's fallen or a fire and all that. But if they're still stuck in the traffic jam, those guys can't come help from municipal aid. But what I'm more concerned about is the idiots coming from Maplewood or coming the other direction that don't care about the rest of that, and they're just now inconvenienced, and there isn't enough information or to then just forcefully them in. Well, Dorothy's backed up, guess I'm going down Helen now. And, oh, well, I guess I'm gonna go down, I can't think of the rest of the streets. Oh, well, that's a dead end, the one before Helen. So they're gonna turn down there not knowing that that doesn't go through. Well, they're coming down there and turning around and coming back up. Hope not, but I just have a feeling that this is not going to turn out well, and it's gonna be a black eye on Brentwood, committees that didn't really look forward or just temporary signage to make sure that, since MoDOT is clearly wants nothing to do with this because it's a single road closure, which I totally disagree with. Highway 100 is a highway, so they should have more information forcing people up and down Hanley or Brentwood.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Kelly, anybody else online?
No, there are not.
Okay. Oh, Matt, welcome back.
Very quickly on the lights on the, I would consider if you have a short window, that either financially or numerically, you pick an allowance for a number of those light posts that you would like an outlet on. I like what Alderman Gould said about gateway, so not just thinking the south side, but maybe a gateway at each end, or maybe wherever the entrance to the new play area would be. But if you had an allowance of the number of pieces coming from the factory, that would typically buy you enough time to decide where they went. Just a thought. And as a resident of Eulalie, I can always tell when Manchester Road's closed. In fact, I can always tell when all y'all who don't live on our street drive down our street, we know who you are. So, and I would actually consider posting something because it's one lane, face it, with people parked on both sides. And you take tractor trailers down there, it's not gonna be good.
Yeah, Carl.
Very pro carnival. I know that's already done. But you know, what's the draw gonna be, right? You know, and I got one, you know, my teenager's out, but the little one, he'd love a carnival again, right? You know, so anyway, it's something else. Last comment. All the many things I've talked about tonight seem to tie together this thread of vision about the future of the city, right? And so we're at this transformational moment when we're spending all this money on it, which is a fantastic project. We're re-envisioning Manchester. You know, since I moved here 17 years ago, I've longed for that strip to turn into something other than what it currently is, and it's starting to happen. I'm very excited about it as a resident. So just anything we can do to keep that, you know, design is what we do. So to have that considered in a design totality and not just done in little pieces is a huge difference, right? So the lights, you know, the other expenditures, you know, so that's all I would say, just to keep those ideas in place, because, you know, it's maybe a money here, a money there, but it might actually amount to a whole bunch of something for the future of our town. So I like the way you approached it tonight, so thank you. So.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody else? Great.
Second.
All right, discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Great. Thanks, everybody. Great meeting.